Miss Evans on the Titanic. On a beautiful afternoon in April 1912, the Titanic started on its first journey from England to America. It was scheduled to arrive in New York in 7 days. The Titanic was one of the biggest ships ever built. About 2,200 people were on this ship. Everything in it was new and clean. Everyone was enjoying the journey. On the 5th day, it got colder and colder. There were some icebergs around the Titanic. Icebergs are dangerous to ships. Only part of an iceberg shows above the water, and most of it is under the water. Late that night, a man watching for icebergs saw a very big one near the ship. He shouted, "Icebergs ahead!" But it was too late. The ship hit the iceberg and began to sink slowly into the sea. All the people had to leave the ship quickly. The women and children were the first to get into the lifeboats. But one woman was left behind. She came up to the side of the ship and shouted, "Oh, please make room for me. My children are down there on that ship. I must go with them." "There's no more room here," someone in the boat shouted back. Her little son and daughter heard her and began to cry. "Mother! Mother!" No one knew what to do. Suddenly, a young woman sitting near the children stood up and said, "I'll go back to the ship. I'm not married. I don't have any children." There was no time to lose. The young woman went back into the ship, and the children's mother got into the lifeboat. Soon after that, the Titanic went under the water. The young woman's name was Miss Evans. She was going home to Boston. No more is known about her. That night, about 1,500 people lost their lives. Miss Evans was one of them. The story of a sailor. In a small village in England, there was a pretty little girl. Her name was June. She often played with 2 little boys. One was George, and the other was Paul. They sometimes had quarrels. They said to each other, "June loves me more." When they had a quarrel, June cried and said, Please stop quarreling. Let's be good friends." Years went by, and the 2 boys became strong young men. George became a sailor, and Paul became an engineer. After a few years, George and June were married. They had a small shop. Soon they had a child, and then another. They lived happily for some years. But one day, George said, "June, I've worked hard, but I can't get enough money for you. All our money will be spent soon. I'm going to be a sailor again." "Oh no, George," said June. "Don't leave me and our children. I'm quite happy." "We can't be happy without money. I'll be back, June." June waited and waited, but George did not come back. One evening, Paul and June sat together. They watched the sea for a long time. At last, Paul said to June, "There's no news from George. He may be dead. Will you marry me, June? I've loved you for many years." After a long silence, June said, "Please wait 1 more year, Paul." 1 more year went by, and then Paul and June were married. The 2 children were happy because they had a father. June was happy too. and she began to forget about George. But George was not dead. He had worked hard and made a lot of money, but on his way home his ship was lost at sea. After many years he came back to his village, but no one knew him. George wanted to know about his family. He asked many people. An old woman said to him, "June became Paul's wife long ago. Now they live in a house behind the church." George was shocked. When evening came, he walked slowly towards June's house. There was a light in one window. He looked through it and saw June and Paul. They were talking happily. He watched them for a long time. Then he went away.